disciplined nafs leads to a disciplined life. I saw this on my TikTok the other day and I was like, it really can be that simple, right? And truthfully, it really just comes down to that, right? Let's talk about the nafs in relation to self-discipline. Let's start by actually breaking down and defining the term nafs, because I feel like nowadays that term is kind of thrown around a lot, like, you know, controlling the nafs and how to control your nafs, how to tame your nafs, the stages of nafs. Like, all of these topics are very important, but I think people forget to actually break it down and talk about its importance and why you need to control your nafs, okay? To really go into what the nafs is. In simple terms, the nafs is the self that wants, okay? Also known as the internal self, right? And it comes from the word nafasa or nafas, which means breath or to breathe. You can say that the nafs is what breathes inside of you. It's what lives inside of you because it is you, right? It is your soul. So yeah, this can mean anything from your desires to your impulses to your thoughts to your intentions. I think the biggest misconception about this concept is that it is something that is negative, right? You know, when you hear like, oh, you need to control your nafs, like you view it as this like entity that is like separate from you, and it's kind of this like animalistic thing that like drives you. The reality is that you have trained your nafs to be that way, okay? The nafs is like a muscle. So imagine it that way. It's a muscle that you can train, which also means that the nafs isn't fixed, right? It is something that you can reshape again, and it's something you can mold again and again and again, right? It is not something that is fixed. So that is the good thing. Now, you need to break that cycle, right? If you feel like, and obviously there are stages of nafs, but I'm not going to go into that today. The reason why you repeat negative patterns or habits or fall into the same sins is because you have trained your nafs to be that way. Now, it's because your nafs is in that stage, it's harder for you to get out of it, and you repeat it again and again. And therefore now there is more friction, right? When it comes to getting out of this specific habit that you keep going back to. But like I said, the good thing is that it is something that can be fixed and it's something that can be reversed. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this point up in relation to discipline and taking action is because it is entirely concerned with looking inwards and reflecting on what you need to change. Anything you do in life starts with looking inwards. We live in a very fast-paced, very hyper-connected world, right? And naturally, distractions will exist. They're all around us. Your phones, doom scrolling, and these distractions stem from prioritizing your desires over your duties, right? The second you're letting this happen, you are actually letting your nafs control you, right? That is why it is so important that you look inwards and identify what your distraction is, what is holding you back, and take the practical step to limit them. You need to separate your nafs from your personality. You can't identify it as a personality trait, like I am this way, because you need to recognize that the nafs is not something that is fixed. It is something that is moldable and something you can change. Like I said, it's like a muscle that you train, right? So think of controlling your nafs as a system rather than a trait. If you are viewing it as a system, you need to recognize that if your system is weak, your system can break, right? And then you will collapse regardless of how good of a person you are, regardless of how good your intentions are. A system will break if it's weak, right? Which is why you need to work on strengthening your nafs. And I can get into that in a different video, but today I just want to bring attention to what nafs is really and break it down within the context of, you know, hadith and surahs and stuff. So yeah, so you're viewing it as a system rather than a personality trait. You need to separate it from each other. It quite literally dictates your daily reality. Like I said, you need to be able to control your nafs. And you need to strive to be better, inshallah. Now, there's an ayah in the Quran, and it kind of talks about this, like it's more so in how to purify your nafs and your soul and that every human being has an obligation, has like a responsibility to acknowledge this, right? To acknowledge that you need to purify your soul, right? The ayah is قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He has succeeded who purifies it, referring to the nafs, and he has failed it who instills it with corruption. When you first look at it and when you first translate this verse, it's kind of easy to understand. It's saying that success comes to those who purify their soul, while those who corrupt it with negative traits face failure, right? Now, the gist of it is that individuals are responsible for their internal state, right? Like that is something that everyone has been given a moral obligation. You need to take responsibility of that, right? But when you are looking into the full context of this verse and surah, this is from Surah Shams, by the way, you will find that the surah starts by listing cosmic signs of the universe. So the sun, the moon, the earth, the day, the night, and they're listed as oaths, highlight the greatness of the creator, right? And his creations. I'm just going to quickly read the verses of the Quran, the surah that I want to talk about more specifically and then provide its definition. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. Okay, and the definition of these verses are: sun and its brightness, by the moon when it follows, it reflects the sun's light, by the day when it unfolds its glory, by the night when it enshrouds it, by the heaven and he who made it, by the earth and he who spread it, and by the soul and he who perfected it, then inspired it to understand what is wrong and what is right for it. Indeed, he succeeds who purifies it, and indeed he fails who corrupts it. So very clearly you can see that the surah is listing a bunch of these oaths. Allah is swearing by these signs, right? Like he's saying by the sun and its brightness, and the moon when it follows it, etc. These are a series of very powerful signs and very powerful oaths, very obviously drawing attention to Allah's creations, to the natural world, the sun, the moon, the day, the night, and ultimately his creative power. But what's crazy is that right after these oaths, the human soul is mentioned. Like within the same, you can say like paragraph, right? The human soul is brought attention to. Like imagine how much importance God has given to mankind and the human soul and the mankind's responsibility over the human soul, to mention it amongst all these creations. Like subhanallah, like he's pointing towards the human soul and then giving it as much importance as the heavens, as the moon, as the sun, as the earth. Like what? Fun fact, the number of oaths that are listed in this kind of way, like stylistically, like in this type of order, is actually the largest throughout the entire Quran, right? And that is kind of a big deal, because the human soul is mentioned after the largest list in that kind of way. I don't know, for me it's kind of... So ultimately, that is the main sort of theme of that surah, right? It's basically just drawing attention to the human soul and its importance. And it's kind of, if you think about it, it's like, think about its scale. Like think about the importance in terms of scale. Like you're mentioning the sun and the moon and then the human soul. Like that should give you perspective on how important it is to nurture your soul, right? It's also reflecting on the fate of the man as well, right? Because so much so that if you have failed your soul, you have failed your life. That is what it's saying. It's saying in verse 9 and 10, for example, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Indeed he succeeds who purifies it, and indeed he fails who corrupts it. Your success, your salvation, your position in life is entirely dependent on how well you keep your soul pure. And the same way, your failure and your decline in life is also entirely dependent on yourself too, right? And it's basically putting it as like a measurement, like that is the measure of failure and success. Like if you read that and you don't want to change your life, like I don't know what will make you want to change your life, you know? You as a human have a responsibility for the moral choices that you make. That is what it's saying. It comes down to that simple message. Everyone's given a moral responsibility and obligation to either not take care of their soul or take care of their soul. It's not easy, but it is simple. Okay. Now, I like to use the garden analogy when it comes to the nafs and your soul. So think of your nafs as an infertile garden. Okay. And the reason I say an infertile garden is because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human soul and created mankind, He already placed knowledge of good and evil within us. Okay. Which is why when you think about it, humans kind of have this, like, you know, more often than not, we're inclined to do better or to do good or strive towards goodness at least. Think of it in that way. Like God has placed already the ability to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. If you're watching this, you probably know right from wrong, right? But this surah also brings attention to that. And by the soul and He who perfected it, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, then inspired it to understand what is right and what is right for it. Sorry, what is wrong and what is right for it. So now going back to that garden analogy, your nafs is an infertile garden. You can either choose to water it, to weed the garden, to add more fertilizer, to consistently pour water into it, to let good fruits grow into it and purify it. Or you can neglect the garden and you can throw waste into it and you can forget to water it and just let your seeds rot, ultimately corrupting it, right? Now imagine that garden as your soul. Which option would you pick? You would choose the option to purify it, right? I advise whoever watching this to sit with that and really ponder, because I think that it is something very simple, but something so profound at the same time. For me at least, like I cannot read this and now know this piece of information and not want to change my life. Like I cannot just sit with that. So I hope that it helps somebody. I can probably also get into the stages of nafs, but I just wanted to talk about it at its core. When it comes to disciplining your nafs, that's a whole other topic that I can get into as well. If you want me to offer like practical tips on how to do that, then that could be another topic for another day as well. A disciplined nafs leads to a disciplined life.